3 myths that self-help gurus promote. Likely the gurus that you talk about, the ones that you follow, the ones that you listen to all the time. Agency owners, consultants and coaches. If you're struggling to break profit walls, overcome burnout, and simply can't increase your productivity within your teams, listen up. My name is Alexander. For the last 5 years, I've been working with high achievers and entrepreneurs quite like yourselves, overcoming these issues, using practical and advanced, but very uncommon and generic methods to be able to do so, things you haven't heard of before. If you want to exactly find out what those methods are, click the link in the description. And furthermore, if you're going to like this content, and I know you will, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now, getting into the content of it all, there's 3 myths that you will hear the most in the self-help world, right? They love it. They follow it like it's a religion. The first, which is the most common one, is that you can work through your pain, your anxiety, your depression. This is a lie. I understand why people say this, right? And to a certain extent it works, but it's not sustainable. Maybe it works for a few weeks or the short term overall, but it doesn't. And let me tell you why this is. The human brain is wired in a certain way that resistance constantly allows it to grow. Putting it under pressure allows it to grow. And this comes down to a certain few components. This is function, intention, and environment. So the function is what you're applying your brain to. So for example, there's going to be a massive difference between if you're painting a picture of complex nature with pencils, pens and paints, as opposed to working with, a maths equation, right? It's going to be very different. One is creative, one is non-creative. So what that means is you're applying your mind in a way that's specified to a certain brain function. This leads me to the second point of this, which is that you have to apply your brain in the right environment, right? Now, let's look at addicts, for example, because the majority of addicts are also depressed, which is why they're addicted. The addiction is a symptom of depression, right? Now, most addicts don't have a problem with staying clean. They have a problem with their environment, which is the number one reason why addicts don't stay clean, right? All it takes is that one guy to go back to or walk past the bar that you used to get drunk at every night, or the one smoker that used to walk past the social group that hangs around on the corner and they see them smoking and smell the cigarette in the air. It's the environment. When they take themselves away from the environment, then ultimately that's the first step to helping them change the structure of their brain, right? Which leads me to the third part. You've got to change the structure of your brain. It's not about essentially having all these little tips, tricks, and just habits, right? Habits are okay, but they are outside. They're in the external world. You're applying it there. You have to change the structure of your brain in itself. That is the core of the problem. And that's the third thing that doesn't work when you're trying to work through everything, right? Because if you're still applying your brain the same way as you were when you weren't depressed every day, nothing's changed. You're just trying to beat the same horse with a different stick, expecting it to run faster, right? And go further and run for longer. That's not how it works. So to sort of round that first point up is when we're talking about this idea of working through your pain, working through anxiety, working through depression, it's not sustainable. And this is why corporate workers, especially, you find in high stress environments, tech companies, finance companies, insurance companies, even law especially, law sector and law corporations, companies, they have the highest percentage of corporate addicts and alcoholics in any industry. You can search that up if you really want to quote me on that. And it'll tell you straight away. And the reason why that is because they're in high pressure environments, first point, in low function environments. And what I mean by that is non-creative functions, very process driven, as well as they're told constantly to work. You'll be fine. You'll work through it. There's very little space in those environments that are high pressure and often quite toxic in terms of leadership for, it's okay, take a mental health day, right? There's very little space for that. It doesn't accommodate for that. So within the 3 dynamics I've just explained, you can see why ultimately none of it's working for anybody. It's completely stacked against them. And that is why you've got to not work through the pain, but face it. That's the result, ultimately. Do you want to end up being the rich corporate worker slash billionaire slash entrepreneur that's worked all their life, and then they get to the top and say, okay, well, I've got everything else I want on the outside, but unfortunately, I still feel like chaos in here. Because what is the reflection of your life, the way you perceive it, what you create, other than just a reflection of your own mind? What's going on in here? And this is something that is missing. You cannot work through your pain, right? You can deny it, but the folly is thinking that that is transcending it, pushing through it, overcoming it. It's not. It's burying it and denying you have it in the first place. And that is something you have to remember all the time. So, bringing you back to the original topic, which is 3 myths that self-help gurus tell you, right? That's the first one, is that you can work through your pain. And as I've just explained, you can't do that. Remember, always, to transcend your pain, you must face it and change the structure of the brain itself. It begins in here, which leads me, interestingly enough, to the second myth that you're told by the gurus out there. And that, quite frankly, is, in my opinion, one of the worst ones. And that is that mindset is everything. Now, some of you watching this might actually be a little bit shocked to hear this. You're thinking, so what do you mean? Well, I'm saying that mindset in itself, even if it's a positive one, is a limitation. Why do I say that? Well, that's because mindset implies a specific limited set of tools for a specific purpose, which still suggests a lack of flexibility and limitation. Even if it's the most positive mindset in the world, right? It's still a set. It's still in stone for a specific purpose. Now that's okay, right? I'm not saying that you have to identify and adopt, personal views of every Tom, Dick and Harry. No, it's got to be channeled though. And this is the difference from making the jump from what's called the mindset to the mind space. Now, what is the mind space? Well, the mind space is something that is integrated with what's called fluid intelligence. Now, this is a terminology that's been forgotten over many years, but let me explain this to you guys very simplistically. What does this look like for a human being once it's applied? Let's go back to Italian Renaissance era, for example, right? The Italian education system in the Renaissance era was one of the most advanced and comprehensive in all of Europe, for the simple reason that the variation of subjects and disciplines it would teach. It would teach anything from advanced arts through to astrophysics, spacing, as well as, martial arts, performing arts, all the way down to some of the more rigid topics such as language, as well as mathematics, geography, certain sciences. And the reason why that was so powerful is because it expanded subjects across all of human potential, right? It allowed the creative and the non-creative subjects to be taught to students. And that's why, on average, in that time period, again, you can check this, the average intelligence IQ quota of students coming out of the top schools, top universities in Italy, they were among the highest again in Europe, because they reimbursed fluid intelligence, because it's about a range of subjects, both non-creative and creative, that a human being can apply, right? In medieval times, a man could be a baker, but he could also be a butcher, a blacksmith, a carpenter and an artist all at the same time, and was very commonly so. Massive sets of skills. But these days you're taught to pick one path, that's your expertise, I'm an expertise in this and nothing else, that's it. And what that means is, as human beings, we are polymaths, which means more than one, multiple disciplines. That's by nature what we have the ability to do. We can master multiple disciplines. Don't listen to this idea that, if you pick one thing, then that's all you're going to do. No, it's rubbish. You can be an expert on multiple things. But this is exactly the shift from mindset to mind space, right? Mindset is saying, okay, this is the particular purpose I need this way of thinking for. You read a book and say, I want to adopt that person's way of thinking. But don't adopt their way of thinking. Take that knowledge and make it your own. That's why you can read endless books and try to adopt different mindsets, but you'll always be changing. And you may have even noticed this yourself, when you're in a positive mindset, but then you're starting a new path, even though it's super positive, it's challenging to flip into a different way of thinking. It's because you've boxed yourself in. So the mind space is not seeing your skill sets as your identity, but as an extension of your potential. And that is the first step to make that shift. And this is what the self-help gurus don't tell you. They'll say, positive mindset, stick with that, that's it, right? And it's okay, and it works for a short period of time, but you're more than that. You can be more than that, and you've got to choose to. So to make that shift, see your skills, see your purpose. It's not you, it's not your identity, it's an extension of your potential. What is your identity? I'm not going to tell you what it is, but a suggestion could be something that we all share, which is we are all human beings with brains, with latent, limitless potential within us. And every means of fulfilling that potential when we wake up in the morning every day. We already have all the tools. We know how to speak, listen, apply, build with our hands and our minds. We've got an imagination. That's all we need to fulfill that potential. That could be a purpose, because that's something that no one can take from you, right? And everything else you do in your life, whatever ways of thinking that you adopt, see them only as extensions of your potential. Little simulations or pockets that you dive into whenever you need them for a certain purpose. Not, okay, this is what I've got to think and how I've got to think for the rest of 2024 to do this purpose. You can be more than that. Who says you can't have everything? Definitely not me. Now this leads us to the crux of this video. If you want to find out how you can break through these profit walls, increase your team's productivity, and prevent burnout, click the link in the description. This leads us to the third and most important myth that you've been told, not just by self-help gurus, but by parents, by schools, the education system, society as a whole. Now, it's important that you listen to this, because this isn't something that may affect just you. This is something you'll likely see in other people around you. Family, friends, even people you don't know. All you have to do is look online and you'll see this. But that thing is that your brain is a rock. It's not, right? Your brain, or that you use only 10% of your potential within the brain. This is a common thing I hear. It's not true. It is a myth. That was true in psychology 40 years ago until we had neuroscience, right? And the reason why I say this is important is for this reason. Diagnoses for mental disorders, or whatever the medical professionals want to call them these days, are part of the problem. They're part of the problem because it makes people believe that because they have this disorder, whether that be ADHD, dyslexia, autism, that they are limited because of this. When you look at society, education systems are built to help left brain, non-divergent creative thinkers, like the people I just mentioned, dyslexics or ADHD, autism, they're built to marginalize them. That's why they struggle in school the most. I know this because I went through it myself. I'm dyslexic and I write books for a living. Bizarre, I know. But the point being is, I'm able to do that because I realized that society is designed to not make you thrive. Now, I don't say this to say it's a victim and to say, oh, okay, F the matrix, whatever. It's not about that. Life is what you make it. But I say that to help you realize that actually they aren't disorders, they're gifts. And because civilization is built to create worker bees, right, non-creative, suck that genius level of creativity and, curiosity out of the average human being, that is your gift, because you still have that. You still have that creativity. You still have all those ideas rattling through your mind, not knowing what to do with them. You still have the curiosity for more. And that, in the future, with new technologies, things like artificial intelligence as well, that is going to be your necessary skill, and that's going to put you ahead. So I say that to say that ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and other sort of, I don't want to call them diagnoses or disorders, but I would say more so gifts like that, differentials. They are not limitations. They are simply untapped potential, rattling around in the form of chaos within the mind. because you live in a world that isn't designed and equipped to help channel that potential. Or at the very least, it doesn't want to. Not yet. So to bring that back to the original point being that this idea that you only use 10% of your brain, or that if you have a deficiency or a disorder of some sort, you use even less. It's rubbish, because thanks to neuroscience, we've now proven that we actually, give or take a decimal point percentage here or there, we use almost 100% of our brains. The difference is, how efficiently are we using that 100%? Most people, due to how they're conditioned through education and the world, they're using it suboptimally, massively. They're using it like a car that revs 2,000 revs per minute maximum, and they're trying to rev it 4,000, and wondering why it overheats all the time. You know, well, you're not surprised. It's because you're not using it optimally. Most of us are pushed into this left brain non-creative way of thinking by school, by work. But the real potential is within our creativity. And that's what I mean. That's why cognitive decline has been on a, function has been on a decline for 2 points every decade since the end of World War II. And you can check this statistic on the CDC website as well. Actually, it was a study done. And the reason why that is after World War II ended, education changed. It became far more process. It was designed more to suck our creativity and our curiosity out of us. You know, if you put your hand up in class or you've got an answer, you say, no, just listen, put it down. You're shunned constantly. If you answer a question on an exam, you can answer it 5 different ways that demonstrates right understanding of the subject. But if you don't use this word or this terminology, you won't get the marks. All of it, it's all designed to suck out that creativity. And that's why, since then, decline has gradually, pounded up. That's about 14 points in cognitive decline among the average human being, because they're sapped of their creativity. So, I say this to say, your potential is nothing that anybody could take from you. No one can take that from you. But make no mistake about it. No mistake about it. You are not using only 10%. Your brain isn't a rock. It's fluid. It's called neuroplasticity. It's like Play-Doh. The more you move it and mold it, the more it expands. Mindset will only get you so far, but eventually you're going to have to make a shift to the mind space. That is true mental freedom, where you are none but all at the same time. And finally, just remember, it doesn't matter where you are in your growth, how far you're going, how far you want to go. Even if you just want to improve your mental health so you don't feel like the world's burning down around you, it requires the same. Change the structure of your brain, optimize your environment, change the functions that you're applying your brain to, and give it the right intentions, give it the right information so it can give you the right output. That is your solution.